Don't give up because you're going to lose.
All right. Settle in. I would encourage you to get something out to flow on, to write on. So get a document. Do it in your regular notes thing. If you have a regular notes thing, do it in new document. That's what you do. This lecture is about how to succeed as a sophomore, and you don't need to, as you're taking notes, write down everything I'm going to say. But I would encourage you to write down kind of the bullet points. And this is more of a think about this than necessarily memorize this kind of thing. So I want to start by saying that sophomore year is very hard. And when I say sophomore, I mean that in two senses. I mean that in the actual sense of you're a sophomore, like a second year high school student. But I also mean that in the broader kind of debate sense, which is that you're transitioning from novice debate to varsity debate, or from novice/JV debate to varsity debate. So I think that when I use the term, I'm going to use the term sophomore just because it's easier to say that. But what I really mean is students in your level, students in your part of the debate spectrum. The reason that sophomore year is so hard for debaters is that unlike most high school sports, there's a huge gulf between the best varsity competitors and the worst varsity competitors. And in most sports, as you advance in athletics, it's rare that a sophomore will be on the varsity team. If they are on the varsity team, they've been a top level competitor for a long time. If you're on the varsity team as a football player and you're a sophomore in high school, you've probably been playing football since you were 6 years old. If you're on the varsity tennis team as a sophomore, you've probably been playing tennis since you were 6 years old. But in debate, you're on the varsity debate team, even if you've only been doing debate for 1 year or for 2 years, if you started in 7th grade or 8th grade. Maybe it's your 3rd year, but 2 of those years were as a middle school student. And so it's much harder to be a sophomore on the varsity debate team than it is to be a sophomore on the varsity athletic teams, because of your relative lack of experience, and also because you're directly competing against single teams that are among the best teams in the activity. When you're a football player, if you make the varsity team, even if you're a starting player on your football team, your team competes against another really competitive team, but you don't compete individually against seniors and against juniors and against really top flight competitors. So I wrote this lecture, and this is the first time I've ever done this, because I wanted to share some things that I think I know about the experience of being a sophomore. And that's based on a lot of sophomores that I have coached. Some of the sophomores have been among the best sophomores that I've ever seen. Some of them, a much more substantial number of them struggled a lot. And I've watched a lot of students struggle as sophomores. And I've always kind of thought, I should really just kind of share some of these things. And so I finally decided to put it all together. And I reached out to Mahoney and asked him if I could do this. So what I'm going to do is pretty straightforward. I'm going to give you 20 things that I think you should do as a sophomore. And I picked 20 because, you're sophomores, you like round numbers, and it worked out. So 20, that works. And interspersed throughout those 20 things that I think you should do to find success as a sophomore, there are 5 kind of warnings about the 5 archetypes of failing sophomore debaters or failed sophomore debaters. I kind of thought about all of the people that I had seen debate as freshmen and then as sophomores, and then watched them progress as juniors and seniors. And I thought about, all right, well, a lot of those students that I remember were either really good as sophomores or they were really good as freshmen, and they never really panned out. And I kind of tried to categorize those and find some common themes between those students, and I'm gonna kind of share those with you throughout. So I'll flag those as we go. Many of the suggestions, so many of these 20 things are accompanied by a quotation from John Wooden, who was the longtime basketball coach at UCLA and is one of the greatest coaches of anything ever. He won 10 national championships in a 12-year period. He was Coach of the Year 6 times. He's in every Hall of Fame that you can think of. He's an incredibly successful coach, and he wrote a lot of incredibly powerful things about coaching. So when I had a lot of thoughts, and then I tried to figure out a way to put them all together. And so kind of the way that I came up with, or the thing that I came up with, the package I came up with is, this is what I think John Wooden would tell you if John Wooden was still alive and he was coaching high school debate and he was going to talk to you, a group of sophomores in debate. So 20 things. Number 1, understand your place on the team. Understand your place on the team. Some of what I'm going to tell you is relative, and it does depend a little bit on your particular placement on your debate team. And there's a lot of possibility. Some of you are going to be debating with older students. You might be debating with a senior. You might be on your school's top team. Some of you might be debating with another sophomore, but that sophomore pairing is the top team at your school. Some of you will be farther down on the totem pole. Maybe you'll be your school's best sophomore team, or you'll be your team's second best sophomore team, or you might be your team's fifth best or seventh best sophomore team. Usually it's not really your call to make where you are on your debate team's totem pole, and you don't get to decide. You just get to kind of figure it out and make peace with it. And you can improve your status over time if you work hard. But you need to figure out where you fit, and you need to kind of think about, all right, this is where I'm at the beginning of the year. I'm gonna make peace with that, and I'm gonna behave appropriately. Almost everything else, almost all 19 things, I think, are applicable to students in all situations. So regardless of where you are on your team's totem pole, regardless of what kind of sophomore debater you are, I think that these tips apply. But you need to think about and contextualize some of what I say to your particular position. So sometimes you won't have as much control over some of the variables that I described. Number 2, develop a good relationship with your coach or coaches. It doesn't matter what kind of coach you have, whether you have an argument coach, a teacher, a sponsor, a chaperone. You need to develop a good relationship, and you need to earn their respect. And sophomore year is the most important time to do that, because you're transitioning from just a beginner who was trying out the activity into someone who's sticking with it and is going to become a foundational member of the varsity team. A lot of sophomores struggle with that because they get bad attitudes, and there's a variety of those bad attitudes, but the most common one is they were good as novice debaters and they have some sense of entitlement. They think that they deserve kind of hotshot treatment as sophomores, and they want to get some opportunities that some of the older students aren't getting, and they really want a lot of attention, and they want to kind of be the center of the debate team. And a lot of times that puts them into conflict with their coach, and the reputation that you earn as a sophomore tends to be difficult to get rid of. There's certainly been examples of sophomores that I think had relatively poor attitudes, or that I didn't get along with that well, that then as they grew up and matured as juniors and seniors, we started to work better with each other, and they started to kind of rebuild their reputation. But it's very difficult. And you should know that from the moment that you get back to wherever it is you come from, and the first time that you interact with your coach this season, and then throughout the beginning of the season, you're setting the tone for your whole existence as a varsity debater. And if you've got a new coach, that's particularly important. If you've got an old coach, this is your chance to kind of say, all right, I made some mistakes last year as a freshman or as a novice. I want to fix that. I want to change my attitude, and I want to really build a good, solid, respect-driven relationship with you, my coach. Number 3, develop a good relationship with your teammates. Develop a good relationship with your teammates. It doesn't matter whether you are your school's best sophomore or you're a returning sophomore that doesn't have very much experience and didn't have a very successful or very vibrant novice year. You need to learn to work well with the rest of your team. And it doesn't matter if you like the rest of your team or you hate the rest of your team. You have to play with the team you have. Becoming a well-liked, well-respected member of the team, especially as a sophomore, requires that you be respectful, that you know your place, that you work hard, that you're reliable, you do what you say you're going to do, that you're selfless, that you help the other members of the team, and that you really place the emphasis on the team. The way to win over your older students, your older teammates, is to really make yourself team-centered and to be selfless and to be respectful and to try to find ways to help and to do your part and to contribute, not to ask your older student teammates to do things for you. And the way to get them to do things for you is to do things for them. In particular, take pride in your team's successes, not just your own successes. I've found over the years that sophomores tend to struggle with that. A lot of you were hotshot novice debaters, and we're going to talk about kind of how that's going to change. And so you tend to be selfish, or you kind of get upset when some of the other students on your team do well, because it's like, well, I wanted to do well. I want that attention. I wish that I was the person that had won that award, or that had cleared at that tournament, or that had gotten to go to that tournament. But that kind of attitude is self-defeating, because it means that your coach will not like you as much and so won't give you as many opportunities. It means that your teammates won't like you as much. They won't support you as much. You really need to compete with your teammates and not compete against your teammates. And that For some of you, especially on really big squads in your novice year, it's not like that because you just kind of got to compete to survive novice year. You got 30 kids in your novice class, and you just gotta somehow get some attention and get them to notice you. That changes when you're a sophomore. You're no longer competing for attention. You need to be competing for your team, competing with your team, not competing against your teammates. Number 4, appreciate your place on the career arc. Appreciate your place on the career arc. Here's the first John Wooden quote. In life, worthwhile accomplishments and acquisitions take time. Usually, the better the reward, the more time it takes to acquire it. I like that one. It's early. You're sophomores. Some of you are, second year juniors. Some of you are second year ninth graders, whatever. But you have several years left in your debate careers. You should not expect to immediately achieve senior year style success. And you should not approach debate as if this was your senior year. It's not your senior year, it's your sophomore year. And you need to understand that your sophomore year is part of an overall arc of development as a debater, not the culmination of your experience as a debater. Are we okay? We're having a conversation? We're not interested in what I have to say?
No. How do you spell arc?
Okay, that's not a question that you need to ask right now. ARC would be okay. Set goals, and when you're thinking about the season, set goals that will effectively set you up for success over the long term. So don't think about, all right, how can I have the most successful sophomore year possible? Think about how can I have a successful sophomore year that sets me up for the most successful debate career possible. So the most successful sophomore year and junior year and senior year. Set goals that you can achieve immediately, for sure, and the goals that incentivize hard work, and I'm going to talk about several of those things. But make sure that your goals are fitting into an overall context, an overall kind of vision for what your experience in debate is going to be like. This is a great opportunity as you start your sophomore year to think about what you want your relationship with debate to be like. You didn't really need to do that last year. You don't really need to do that when you're a novice. You're still kind of trying it out. What I would encourage you to do is kind of think about the day that you graduate from high school and what that's going to be like, and think about what you want to look back on debate as. So it's your graduation day, it's your graduation morning, whatever, and you're graduating and you're looking back and you're like, all right, I'm pleased with this experience that I had in debate, or I'm displeased with this experience that I had in debate, and figure out what you want to look back on. And do you want to be one of the most competitive debaters in the country? Do you want to be one of the most competitive debaters on your squad? What do you want to get out of debate? Maybe you don't want that. Maybe you just want to have some good experience in debate, but you don't want to be the best debater. You have to this is a good time to think about that and to figure that out. But you need to understand that this is not the end of your career, even though it feels like every debate is the most important thing in the world. Every tournament is so important. The season is so important. It is important, and I'll talk about that later. But make sure you keep it in context. Number 5, develop strong work habits. Develop strong work habits. John Wooden again. There is no substitute for work. Worthwhile results come from hard work and careful planning. You learn a lot of stuff at debate camp, and sophomore year debate camp. Wow, you learn so many things as you go through this 4 weeks here at Michigan State. But the most important thing that you should be learning is that success in debate requires good work habits, and it requires hard work. And your sophomore year is an excellent opportunity for you to set the tone for how you're going to work for the rest of your high school career. You need to start learning how to balance debate work with school work and with other obligations the rest of your life. You need to think about how you're going to develop work habits as a sophomore that will help you succeed not just as a sophomore, but when you get older, as you transition to a junior and as you transition to a senior. So many of the students that I work with every summer, these phenomenally successful seniors, really regret not better developing their work ethic earlier in their career. They kind of look back and are like, wow, we wasted so much time. We made so many mistakes early in our career. I wish that I had figured out what I know now when I was a sophomore. And the most common thing is just the sense of work habit and working hard at debate. You're not going to immediately succeed as a sophomore. You're going to have some success, and we'll talk about how to measure that success. But you're going to lose a lot, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that you just don't know yet. You got to set achievable, kind of incremental goals for yourself that you can accomplish. Say, I will cut 10 cards this week, or I will highlight 3 files this week, or I will give 3 practice speeches this week, or make it even smaller. I will cut 5 cards this hour. I'm going to spend this hour on debate, or I'm going to give 2 speeches today in front of a varsity debater or a coach. And figure out how you can develop habits that successfully balance debate work with the rest of the work that you need to do. It doesn't matter how good you are now. How good you are later depends on how good of a work ethic you have. Hard work is the way that you get better at debate. And if you can practice working hard, you're going to end up lapping the people that initially were better than you, but that didn't develop those same work habits. Number 6, focus on the fundamentals. This John Wooden quote is a little long, a little bit longer than the others. I discovered early on that the player who learned the fundamentals of basketball is going to have a much better chance of succeeding and rising through the levels of competition than the player who was content to do things his or her own way. A player should be interested in learning why things are done a certain way. The reasons behind the teaching often go a long way to helping develop the skill. I love that quotation. I think that maps so well onto debate. This is one of the most important of the 20 things that I'm going to share with you this evening. If you don't get the fundamentals of debate when you're a sophomore, it's very difficult to learn them later on. If you step over the fundamentals and start to develop advanced skills without the solid foundation, the solid fundamentals that you're building those skills on, you're going to end up with gaps in your debating ability. You're going to end up with weaknesses that can be exploited, and you're going to wish that you had just taken the time when you were young to polish up those fundamental skills, to learn the fundamentals that are required for good debate. There's a great story about Vince Lombardi, the really famous Green Bay Packers coach. He started coaching the Packers in 1959, and in the previous season they had gone 1-10, and they were just terrible. They were an awful team. And on his first day as the coach, he gathered everybody around for practice, and he had everybody come to the 50-yard line and sit down around him, and he grabbed a football, and he held it up, and he was like, "Gentlemen, this is a football." And he just looked, and everyone was like very confused, and they were like, obviously it's a football. Who's this guy who's coaching us? And he said, and I quote, "As a team last year, we were horrible at the fundamentals of the game of football. Nobody here knows how to block, and nobody knows how to tackle. What we're going to do now is go back to basics, and we're going to learn, drill, and practice the fundamentals until we become better at them than anyone else in the game. If you do this with me, I will make you champions." End quote. And that's what they did, and he was right. The Packers won 5 championships in the next 7 years. They turned around the franchise, and the NFL championship trophy is now named after Vince Lombardi. And one of his most famous quotes is, "Excellency is achieved by the mastery of fundamentals." And I think that is just as true of debate as it is of basketball or football or anything else. So think about all of the fundamentals that you need to master to be a really good debater. You need to flow. You need to flow well. You can't just pretend to flow. You can't have basic gaps in your ability to flow. You need to have a quick ear and a quick pen, and you need to be able to flow well. You need line-by-line skills. You need to be able to refute arguments. You need to be able to signpost arguments. If you're getting criticized for being weak at the line-by-line, that's a fundamental skill that you don't have, that you need to develop. Speaking, good speaking, is a fundamental skill. You need to be clear. You need to have good breathing. You need to be able to project and to make connections and to be comprehensible. You need to have control of your voice and maintain it over the course of a season. If you are getting comments that your speaking is not good, you're too slow, you're not clear, you fluctuate, you have a weird speaking voice in debate, that means that fundamental is not being honed. Cross-examination. If you're weak in the cross-examination, that is a fundamental skill that you have not yet honed. You need to get better at the cross-examination, both asking and answering cross-examination questions. Impact comparison is a fundamental skill. If you are not good at comparing relative impacts, if you're not good at doing those top-level comparisons, then that's a fundamental skill that you need to hone before you can move on to more advanced skills. Evidence comparison. You need to have a basic understanding and working knowledge of evidence comparison. You need to be able to compare evidence well and efficiently. Research is a fundamental skill of debate, and it even gets its own number later. But you need to be able to effectively research. You need to be able to effectively use the template and to cut cards and to cite them correctly and to tag them. If you have not demonstrated the ability to do that, then you're missing a fundamental. Paperless, being able to create speech documents and organize documents and flash things to the other team is a fundamental skill that a debater must have before moving on to advanced techniques. All of those, and there are probably others, are just fundamental things that a debater must do well before they can be a truly great debater. And so if you are not great at any of those fundamental skills, you should prioritize getting better at those skills before you move on to more advanced concepts. It doesn't matter if you're a great critique debater if you can't flow or do line by line or speak well or do research. Your weaknesses at the fundamental level will be exposed later in your career, and you will not be as good of a debater as you thought you should have been. Michael Jordan has a great quote about this. The minute you get away from fundamentals, whether it's proper technique, work ethic, or mental preparation, the bottom can fall out of your game, your schoolwork, your job, whatever you're doing. And John Wooden says, if you do not have time to do it right, when will you find the time to do it over? And I love that. If you do not take this moment in your career as you are transitioning to varsity, as you are a sophomore level student, to fix these fundamental skills, you're never going to have time to do it again. And you're going to condemn yourself to a career that is not as successful as it could have been. So here's where I will flag the pitfall to avoid, number one. And that is the pitfall of the really good novice. Debaters in this category are great in the novice division. They were just rock stars in the novice division, but they never really made it past that novice level of debating, even when they were debating in JV or varsity. When they get to be seniors, they're always kind of seen as someone who used to be really good or could have been really good, but never really got there because they lacked fundamentals. They had a lot of trophies when they were novices, but they just, for whatever reason, they decided that they didn't want to learn the fundamentals, and so everyone kind of caught up to them, and they were just a story of, remember that novice debater? They were real good when they were novices, but they're not very good now. Don't be that person. There's a lot of people that end up in that category. Number 7, take it one day at a time. This is a great John Wooden quote. When you improve a little each day, eventually big things occur. Not tomorrow, not the next day, but eventually a big gain is made. Don't look for the big, quick improvement. Seek the small improvement one day at a time. That's the only way it happens. And when it happens, it lasts. It can be overwhelming to be a sophomore in debate. The amount of stuff that you need to know just to compete in varsity tournaments is staggering. It's much more intimidating to make the switch from novice and JV debate to varsity debate than it is to make the shift from JV football to varsity football. The game is the same. The players are just better. In debate, the game is almost different. There's just so much more going on. It can be overwhelming and intimidating just to see how much juniors and seniors know, just all these arguments they've heard, all these skills they've heard, all these judges that they've had before and that they know about, just all the stuff they know. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed. Break it down. Break it down into concepts, kind of component parts that you can chip away at day by day. If you find yourself saying I'm really bad at critiques, you'll go home and your coach will be like, how was camp? And you'll be like, it was great. I'm like, what'd you learn? And you'll be like, oh, so much. And I'm like, well, how are you doing? You're like, well, I'm doing good. Well, what is your biggest struggle? I was like, well, I'm bad at critiques, or I struggle with theory, or I just don't research at all. I'm just not good at that. When you think like that, and when you describe yourself like that, you make it so that you've set yourself up for failure. Like, one day you're bad at critiques, and then somehow you're just going to magically become good at critiques. That's not a thing that can happen. Critiques, or being good at critiques in this example, is such a huge category, and it just means so many things that it's impossible to kind of fix that. And you're bad at critiques, so what do? Instead of thinking about it like that, just break it down into component parts. Learn one critique concept at a time. Just learn one today, and then learn one tomorrow, and then the next day, one more, and then next day, another one. And pretty soon, in a week or two, think of all the things that you've learned. And all of a sudden, instead of I'm bad at critiques, I still can get better at critiques, but I know a heck of a lot of stuff about critiques now. The same thing is true of any concept in debate. If you break it down, it becomes manageable, and when it is manageable, it is something that you can chip away at day after day after day after day. There is no aha moment when all of a sudden everything in debate gets easy. You watch He-Manth debate, or you watch Natalie debate, and you're like, wow, they're so good. I hope someday that clicks for me too, and one day I'm just going to wake up and I'm going to be He-Manth, or one day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be Natalie. That's not how it works. Natalie and He-Manth, when they were sophomores, were not the Natalie and He-Manth that they are now as seniors. They struggled too. And the way that they got better was just incrementally over time, one day at a time, getting better, a little better today, a little better tomorrow, a little better the next day. And pretty soon they were He-Man and Natalie. And that is the way to get better at debate. Don't expect from one day to the next to make gigantic improvements. That's not how it works. Make a little improvement every day, and over time it'll really add up. Number 8, learn to be an excellent researcher. Research is an essential component of debate success, both because it helps you come up with more materials to use in your debates, the obvious benefit, but also because the research process helps you master the literature, and that mastery of the literature is a prerequisite to top-tier, top-notch debating. Most sophomore debaters are very low on what I would call the evidence food chain. Most of the sophomores that I see, most of their work is just kind of open source stuff. They go get a card from somewhere else, from a camp file or from a wiki. They recut cards or sites that someone else has already given them. They do really targeted research. Someone will send them an article and say, cut this, and so they cut it. Or they're supposed to do, some really specific uniqueness stuff, like cut some uniqueness cards about the debt ceiling. That tends to be sophomore year kind of research. Certainly, you should do all of those things if they are assigned to you. So if you're assigned to do those updates, do them. If you are assigned to recut those sites, do that. But you should challenge yourself to do more. You should do extra work. You should do the hard stuff, the real stuff that the varsity students are doing, even if it's never used by any of your varsity students, or even if it's never used by you. Cut the real cards, cut the case cards, cut the disad cards, cut the critique cards, cut the counterplan cards. Try to write a disadvantage or write a counterplan. Try to write a case name. And seek feedback and solicit feedback from your coaches, from older students, from your peers, and really try to get better at this. There's no trick. There's no way to get better at research other than just doing a lot of research and practicing and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't and just learning more and more and more. The sooner that a sophomore debater advances up the food chain from a consumer of other people's evidence to a producer of their own evidence, the faster they will improve and the better they will be. This is a place where I think most sophomores really struggle. And so it's a place where if you make a conscious effort over the course of the year to research consistently and to improve your research capabilities, when you're a junior and a senior, you'll be light years ahead of your peers. Number 9, learn to be well prepared. Learn to be well prepared. John Wooden says, I felt that if the players were prepared, we would do just fine. If we won, great. Frosting on the cake. But at no time did I consider winning to be the cake. Winning has always been the frosting that made the cake a little tastier. Organization and preparation are both skills. They're not just God-given gifts. You're not just born someone who has good organizational skills or good debate preparation skills. You have to work. It's not just, you're not going to one day wake up and be good at organizing or good at preparing. You need to focus on developing the skills that you need to effectively prepare for debates. Many sophomores only read things that other people have written. Other people's blocks, other people's cards, other people's files. Challenge yourself to write your own materials and to revise and edit your materials based on feedback and based on learning. Even if you end up reading the better version of the blocks in your debates, the process of creating and producing your own materials and preparing your own files is immensely valuable. It gets you thinking more strategically. It develops the skills that will set you apart as you become an older, more seasoned veteran student. Sophomores as a class are known for being terribly organized, for being totally disorganized in all honesty. You should try to challenge that notion or challenge that prejudice. You should try to prove me wrong when I say most sophomores are terrible at organizing and most sophomores come to tournaments unprepared. Their files are disorganized. They don't have strategies planned. They haven't planned their cross-examinations. They aren't ready to defend their arguments. Prove me wrong by learning to prepare well. A lot of you are going to be in the position where you're going to tournaments and you're going to debate junior and senior teams, and you're going to want to win. You're going to hope to beat them. But if you're realistic, the only way you can beat someone who's better than you is to be more prepared than they are. You can't trick them. You can't just win by brute force, they're better. They have more experience. They're superior debaters. So if you really want to win, you need to be better prepared. You shouldn't defeat a superior opponent unless you are better prepared than they are. Preparation and organization, which is really just a subset of preparation, that's a great way to close the gap between the people that are better than you and you. If you're better prepared, but they're a little bit better skill-wise, you can win. And if you want to win, that's the place where you can win. Number 10, learn to be versatile. Learn to be versatile. Sophomore year is too early to start pigeonholing yourself and to stop learning new things. You are not yet, or really ever, a 2A or a 2N. You're just a debater. You might do more of the second affirmative speeches. You might do more of the second negative speeches. But stop this idea that you need to self-identify and just decide right now, before you even have fundamental skills, that you are a certain kind of debater. Don't decide now that you're a politics debater, or you're a critique debater, or you're a topicality debater. That's such ridiculous prejudgment, and it's just so stupid to watch sophomores do this year after year. You're just a debater, and you're a fledgling debater, you're a growing debater, you're a prospect debater, you're a sophomore debater. Challenge yourself to diversify the skills that you have so that the skills that you leave sophomore year with are greater than the skills that you showed up for sophomore year with. Learn to give all the different speeches. Learn to go for all the different kinds of arguments. Sophomores that spend a whole year going for the same stuff in every debate tend not to get very much better. They waste a year of development. Winning some debates because you're on your 50th iteration of your critique and the other team isn't very good at answering critiques yet doesn't make you better. It just hurts and slows down your development. It doesn't set you up to be a good junior or senior debater. It might give you a couple extra wins as a sophomore, but honestly, who cares? Why do you care? You should go for topicality sometimes. You should go for a counterplan sometimes. You should go for DA sometimes. You should go for a K sometimes. You should learn to effectively debate and go for the case. Try impact turns. Choose arguments that invite clash and that develop your skills so that when you show up for camp after your sophomore season, you're in position to really learn from your junior year instructors. And by the time you're a senior, you'll have a lot of experience in a lot of different places. You'll be a versatile debater. You'll be a debater that has the flexibility needed to succeed in this era of debate. Don't decide who you are today. You're just a sophomore debater. Number 11, resist the temptation to seek shortcuts. Resist the temptation to seek shortcuts. John Wooden says, if you keep too busy learning the tricks of the trade, you may never learn the trade. And I love that. You sophomores are in love with shortcuts. You want any edge or any way to avoid actually getting better or actually doing work, but still finding success. You all, if I was like, all right, I'm going to give you an elective lecture on how to win without working, everyone at this camp would show up. Every sophomore would show up, and they would be like, I can't wait to learn what Batterman's going to tell us about how we can be a great debater without trying at all. That's what you want. That's what you ask. Your questions, that's what your questions are. That's what you talk about. That's what is reflected by your argument choice. You learn a new thing, and you're like, ooh, conditionality. Most of the sophomores aren't very good at this yet, so I'm just going to go for that, and then I will win. And then I'll be a winning debater. Or, ooh, psychoanalysis. I bet my opponents don't know what that is yet, so I'm just going to say that, and then I'm going to win, and that'll be great. It's a shortcut. I don't have to try. I just, as long as I say that, they'll struggle and I'll win. This makes sense, and it makes sense when you're a sophomore why you would want to do that, because if you go into a debate against a better team and you just debate them straight up, they're very likely to beat you because they're better than you are. But you need to accept that that's reality. You're not going to defeat top senior teams. You're not going to defeat regularly even good junior and senior teams. You're going to lose most of those debates. So you need to figure out a way to lose those debates productively instead of trying to win those debates unproductively. When you win debates, even if you manage to somehow win, most of these shortcuts don't work against older students. So really you're just picking off the other sophomores and maybe some of the weaker juniors. But if you do happen to win with one of these shortcuts, you've obviously won the debate, but I would argue that you've lost the war because you've robbed yourself of a season of development. Every debate where you go into the debate and make an argument and the other team can't answer it and you just kind of win by default is a debate that you didn't have. It's a set of arguments that weren't made. It's skills that weren't developed. It's it's really you need to cross that debate off of your list of how many debates you've had. There are no shortcuts in debate. Sometimes there are ways to trick young students who aren't very good, and you all have experienced that. You've been tricked and you've tricked others. But that stops working real quick, and you're going to find that out in a bad way as a sophomore. If you do a sophomore season based on shortcuts, you can be okay at debate, but you're not going to be a great debater. And if you aim to be the next He-Man or the next Natalie or the next kid that's one of the top kids in the Hoya Spartan Scholars Lab, you got to get rid of your desire for the shortcut right now. Number 12, debate as much as possible. Debate as much as possible. John Wooden says that time lost is time lost. It's gone forever. Some people tell themselves that they will work twice as hard tomorrow to make up for what they did not do today. People should always do their best. If they work twice as hard tomorrow, then they should also have worked twice as hard today. That would have been their best. And I like that quote, and I couldn't find another place to fill it in. Don't put off debating until later. Don't put off debating until you're more ready. Don't put off debating until you have that affirmative ready, or until you're the person you really want to debate with is ready to get around to debating. Don't wait until you're a junior or a senior to get a lot of repetitions in debate. Work hard and debate as much as possible as a sophomore. That's the most important thing that I think you can do, is just have as many good debates as possible. Malcolm Gladwell has this thing in Outliers where he says that you got to have 10,000 hours to be a phenom, right? You heard that before? So if you want to be like the best violinist in the world or something like that, you need 10,000 hours. Obviously, that's only to be like the greatest in the world. I would say in debate, based on my experience and I've been told this by some other coaches, you need about 100 debates before you can be good. You can I would encourage you to mentally think about or go back and figure out how many debates you think you've had as a novice and then during Summer Institute. But a lot of students can get to 100 in their sophomore year. And sometimes you can't. But you want as many rounds as possible. The only caveat here is you've got to make sure that you're staying ahead in school and that you're not burning out. So you've got to be realistic about how many tournaments you can attend. But it's a lot different when you're a senior that's doing a ton of research and that's competing against only the top set of teams. Sometimes they need a weekend off because they got to write their new affirmative or they got to write their new negative strategy, and there's a lot that goes into the preparation for that next big tournament. When you're a sophomore, you got your app, you got some neg stuff, you go to the tournament and you have some debates. Then you come home and you catch up on school, and there's another tournament the next weekend. You get back in the van and you go to that next tournament and you have some more debates with those same materials, and you just keep repeating and debating and debating and debating and debating. There is nothing that you can do that would improve your position as a debater over the rest of your career than just have a ton of debates. Be honest with your parents and with your coaches about your schedule. Don't mess up school because you're going to too many debate tournaments. But when you have the option to go to a debate tournament and it works for you and you can handle it, go to a debate tournament every time, no matter who you're debating with, no matter what debate tournament it is. Podunk Falls High School's 3-round invitational, debating with the worst kid on your team. Go there. Have those debates. 3 debates. 3 terrible debates. Doesn't matter. Have those debates. Couple pitfalls that I'll flag here. Pitfall to avoid, number 2. A debater that I would describe as a flash in the pan. These debaters are great as freshmen, and they're great as sophomores, but then they totally burn out. And if they stick around to be seniors, they don't really like debate that much anymore. They're not working very hard, but most of the time they've quit. I've coached a couple people that fit this description. It was sad, but they went to too many tournaments and they did too much debating in their first 2 years, and they burned out. If you are somebody who is really in love with debating, this is your passion, this is what you want to do, and if you could, you would go to a tournament every single weekend. You got to know that, and you got to be realistic, and you got to make sure that you're not doing too much and that you're not doing it so much that it's ruining your school and kind of turning you off to debate. Because burnout is a real thing, and some sophomores do experience that. Pitfall to avoid, number 3, is the opposite problem. I would call this the missing in action problem. These are debaters that are really good as freshmen, and they win awards as freshmen. They kind of get a little bit of a reputation. They're real good, and everyone's like, ooh, this is a future prospect. I think this person's going to be a really good debater. But then in their sophomore year, you never see them. They maybe go to a couple tournaments, but they don't go to that many. You don't really you don't hear them talked about anymore. A bunch of other sophomores, are working harder, going to more tournaments, and now you start to hear about them more. When these debaters resurface as juniors, everybody's like, what happened to them? I thought they used to be good. I just saw them, and they're all right, but I thought they had a lot of potential. And they're just average now. I'm not that impressed by them. Don't be that person. Go to tournaments. Debate as much as possible. Don't think that just because these are sophomore year debates that they don't matter, and that you can just kind of go to a couple tournaments, and then when you're a junior, then you'll really start debating. It doesn't work like that. If you waste your sophomore year, you never get it back, and it's tough if that's what happens. Number 13, challenge yourself to improve, not just to win. Challenge yourself to improve, not just to win. John Wooden says, goals achieved with little effort are seldom worthwhile or lasting. I like that. What I would tell you is don't sacrifice your development for some wins. The wins in the short term really aren't that important, but the loss of your development in the long term is really important. It can prevent you from being the kind of debater you want to be. It can prevent you from reaching your potential as a junior and as a senior. The way that you should try to beat other teams is to be better prepared and to really practice and to execute really well and to have really strong arguments. And if you knock off a team that's better than you, you should feel great. And that should be your goal at a lot of tournaments. We're really ready to go against this affirmative. We know that there's a couple good teams that read that. If we get a negative debate against that affirmative, we've got a shot. And if we execute perfectly and they make a mistake or two, we have a chance in that debate. And if you win that debate, you should take a great deal of pride in that victory because you earned it. You should not take a great deal of pride if you just kind of try to trick someone or you make the debate terrible and you luck into a win. The judge makes a weird decision or the team just kind of folds and collapses or you pop a team on a really stupid argument. Because there's nothing to be proud of there, right? Sure, you won, but did you really win? You didn't improve at all. You just got credit for a win. When you're a senior and you're competing for a championship, I can understand why people might be willing to resort to some of that stuff when they're a senior. I still don't agree with it. But you're a sophomore. There's no reason that you need to do that. You're not competing for a national championship. You're not competing against the best teams in the country to be one of the best teams in the country. You're just trying to get a cheap win. I would say that a winning record at a tournament earned through tricks or shortcuts is a losing tournament. Because the tournament no longer counts towards your 100 debates. Some of those debates that you had weren't really debates. So a couple of pro tips here. When you're a sophomore, choose an affirmative that invites good debates. An affirmative that the negative will have materials on, that you can defend, that has a rich literature base. You want the negative to argue against your affirmative. You want them to say good counterplans and good DAs. You want them to have case arguments so that you can have good debates, because those good debates count extra. Those are much more productive. You learn a lot more from those debates. It's the reason that your debates at camp are so much better than your debates during the season. There's only a limited amount of evidence. You all know the evidence. You have better debates. Replicate that to some extent during the season. Don't pick an affirmative that the negative is unlikely to have anything to answer, because all that will do is it will result in the negative saying ridiculous things that you're unprepared for, and you'll have debates without any clash. Choose negative arguments that invite good debates. It's good to practice the critique. Don't pick the stupidest critique. Pick a critique that the affirmative will know about and have answers to. Pick the neoliberalism critique or the security critique or whatever, a mainstream critique. Make topicality arguments that they're likely to have answers to. Read counterplans that are kind of core counterplans, core disadvantages. It's okay to switch it around and read different arguments at different tournaments. Switch AFs a couple times. Read different styles of affirmatives so you have experience being more versatile on the affirmative. But always switch to an affirmative or a negative strategy that invites clash. You should want the other team to answer your arguments. If they don't answer your arguments, they didn't help you get better in that debate. And that's your job as a sophomore, is to keep getting better and better and better and better. Pitfall to avoid, number 4. So here's the 4th way that you can fail as a sophomore. I would describe this as the early peaker, the student that peaked early. These are debaters that are awesome as sophomores, but they are awesome using smoke and mirrors. A lot of times they do some case stuff, or they got some kind of theory stuff, or they got some kind of process counterplan kind of stuff. They read really weird or silly impact turns. It's the sophomore team that reads Wipeout or whatever, and they get some wins and they get a reputation, and the other sophomores are like, wow, this team is really good. When that team is a junior team or a senior team, they aren't ever really any better than they were as sophomores, and so they start losing more. Their tricks stop working. Their sophomore peers catch up, and all of a sudden this team that was the hot shots as sophomores is the terrible team that's just struggling to clear as juniors and seniors. And that happens more than you would think. I can think of, just right now, I just mentally thought of about 5 teams in the last 5 years that I would describe in this way. And it's always the same thing. It's always, they're great, but they're only great because they're tricking the other team. And so once the other team learns how to answer the tricks, which they will, sometimes it just takes until late in their sophomore year or their junior year, the tricksters stop winning. And so don't be a trickster if you want to have a good junior and senior year. Number 14, debate arguments, not drops. Debate arguments, not drops. I think this is one of the hardest things for sophomores to understand and deal with, because in the novice division, you've learned that being faster than your opponent and accusing your opponent of dropping things is the nature of the game. That's like how you win a lot of your rounds. You go fast, you say a lot of stuff, and you're like, all right, they dropped this and this and this, we've won. And you kind of, that's what you do. I mean, that's what novice debate is, unfortunately, in a lot of rounds. You've learned kind of to mentally prioritize drops and concessions and that kind of thing. Good debates don't prioritize that. Varsity level debates, if you watch debates between the teams in my lab, if you watch some of those elimination rounds at the camp tournament, those debates are not about coverage, they're about content of arguments. They're about winning the arguments and who has better arguments. Nobody's dropping a DA, nobody's dropping solvency or whatever. Nobody's dropping conditionality. When that happens, it's rare, and that's not how almost any big debates are decided. So you need to start making peace with that. Invite and celebrate engagement and clash and argument. That's why you do debate, not so that you can, say a bunch of things in an incomprehensible way and then jump up and down about how the other team didn't answer one of your so-called arguments. That's not debate. This is why it is so important to choose an affirmative and to choose a set of negative arguments that invite clash, that produce good debate, so that you're doing impact comparison and evidence comparison, and so that you're making critical decisions about which advantage to go for and what negative argument to go for. You want to experience all of that stuff. The experience of that stuff in debates is how you get better. If your style of debate is just to find a drop and then talk about the drop a lot, you're losing an opportunity to learn how to debate, not just how to accuse. This is a great way to sound like a novice and to kind of never really get beyond novice year. Number 15, celebrate success, but keep it in context. John Wooden says, good things take time, as they should. We shouldn't expect good things to happen overnight. Actually, getting something too easily or too soon can cheapen the outcome. I like that. Don't over-concern yourself with sophomore year trophies. I know that's really hard for you to take, because a lot of you are coming from a place where you were a hotshot novice and you were used to going to tournaments and you would win, and that's good. You used to win, but it doesn't make sense to compare how you did last year against other first-year competitors with how you're going to do this year against second and third and fourth and fifth-year competitors. That just doesn't. If you think about it realistically, that doesn't make sense. When you do pull off a big win, when you do find some success, take this as an opportunity to learn how to be a good winner. Act like you've been there before. Take pride in your effort and in how well you're debating. Be respectful of your opponents. You demonstrate sportsmanship, all of that. And understand that a lot of the tournaments that are life or death for you in your sophomore year are not that important. They're fun and you should care about them, and I like it when teams make a big deal about doing really well at the St. Mark Sophomore Hoedown or doing really well at Woodward for the second year championship. Those can be important tests of your how you're doing, but those don't make or break your career. If you do really well at St. Mark's or you do really well at Woodward, that doesn't mean you have had a successful debate career. It just means you did good compared to the other sophomores, or you had a good tournament where you were debating the other sophomores. Losing at those tournaments doesn't mean your career is over or that your sophomore year was a failure. there are many of the best debaters in the country that didn't even go to those tournaments, much less do well at them. Always remember sample size. Keep improving throughout the whole season. Don't over-prioritize any particular tournament. Don't over-celebrate your wins. Don't center your whole life around specific sophomore year tournaments. These are sophomore year tournaments. And obviously when you're a sophomore, they're the most important tournaments because you're a sophomore. But when you're a junior, you'll look back and say, geez, it's weird how all the sophomores are so obsessed with these sophomore tournaments. They're just sophomore tournaments. I'm a junior now. When you're a senior, you'll be like, geez, these sophomores, they're just so sophomoric. They love sophomore tournaments and they're obsessed with them. Remember, you should care. It's good to care. It's good to care about doing well and being well prepared and going there with good arguments and really debating your best at those tournaments. But they're sophomore year tournaments, and they're not the end of the world. Number 16, regularly risk failure. Regularly risk failure. Wooden says, don't permit fear of failure to prevent effort. We are all imperfect and will fail on occasions, but fear of failure is the greatest failure of all. You need to swallow your pride. You're going to lose way more as a sophomore than you've ever lost before. You're going to get destroyed in some debates. You're going to debate, Stratford. You're going to debate GBN. You're going to debate Pace. Or you're going to debate one of these really strong top-tier teams, and you're going to get just crushed. Don't worry. That's what's supposed to happen. They're supposed to beat you. They're supposed to crush you. If it's not a crush, then they haven't done their job. Don't be embarrassed. Don't think that others are going to say, wow, look at that person. They just got crushed by Stratford. They just got crushed by GBN. No one will say that because that's what's supposed to happen. Worry less about being embarrassed and worry more about how can I get something out of this debate? How can I learn something from this experience? How can I make this debate good even though my opponent is way better than I am? Pitfall to avoid, number 5, the last one in this category, what I would call, if only they had reached their potential debater. These debaters are really successful as novices, tend to win a lot of awards and do really well. Everybody knows who they are. They got a lot of potential as sophomores, and they have their moments, but it never really comes together for them. They're never the good debater as a junior and a senior. And what happens is they experience some early losses. And they, don't do very well at a tournament. They go 1-5 at a tournament, or they go 2-4 at a tournament, and they just totally lose their confidence. And they never really get it back. They can't deal with losing. They signed up for debate, and in their first year they won a lot, and they liked that. And then in their second year they lost a lot, and they didn't like that, and they couldn't deal with it. And so they went to less tournaments. They stopped trying because if you try and then you lose, it feels like you failed. But if you don't try and you lose, you can just say, oh, well, I would have won if I had tried. It's hard and you're going to fail and you need to make peace with that. That's what sophomore year is. It's a series of failures in the individual moment that together builds a gigantic success. A bunch of those failed debates against really good teams produces an incredibly useful season, a season that sets you up for an excellent junior year, an excellent senior year. And there's going to be moments in your sophomore year where you have a lot of success. You're going to have big wins. You're going to have debates where everything comes together. You're going to debate an argument that you're really prepared for. You're going to pop a team that's should have beaten you, but you beat them. You do well at a tournament with some other sophomores. And that's all great, but you're going to lose a lot. Every single one of you, no matter how good you are, the greatest sophomore I've ever seen was Hemanth, and he lost a lot as a sophomore. Number 17, celebrate adversity. Celebrate adversity. John Wooden says, we get stronger when we test ourselves. Adversity can make us better. We must be challenged to improve, and adversity is the challenger. Once you make peace with failing, and once you're like, all right, I can fail, you can take it a step further. You can say, I want to fail. I want to fail as many times as possible. I want to fail in every way I can think of. Because all the process of becoming a good varsity debater is learning all of the ways to fail. You have to lose to every ridiculous argument, and you have to lose to every trick that the other team has, and you have to lose and make every mistake that there is to make. Mess up the cross-X and they get a process counter plan. Mess up the 2AC and they get a K. Mess up the theory debate and they beat you on conditionality, whatever. It's just a constant process of messing up. And the more stuff you can mess up, and the earlier you can mess up, the sooner you can start to consolidate your skills and start to get good at those places that you made the mistake. You have to love good debates and you have to love learning And you have to love it when the debates get hard, because you can't avoid hard debates as a sophomore. Even debates against other sophomore teams, once the kind of reins come off and everybody can read whatever argument they want, those debates get immediately annoying and immediately frustrating. You don't have a block to whatever they said. You have no idea what they're saying. They don't know what they're saying. It's just a frustrating debate. You got to love that. You got to say, fine, I'm getting this out of the way. When I'm a junior, I'm going to have had all of these ridiculous debates. That's what I'm going to have done. I'm going to have faced all of these teams, and they're going to do all of this stuff, and I'm going to just get as many repetitions as possible. I'm going to get crushed by good teams as much as possible. I'm just going to keep coming back for more, and I'm going to love it. If you love it and you don't fight it, you can get better more in your sophomore year than any other year in debate. Number 18, don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short. John Wooden says, concentrate on what you do have, not on what you don't. Don't be discouraged, and don't decide that you're bad because you're losing, and don't decide that you're bad because it hasn't clicked for you yet on any particular thing. Break the season up into chunks. Now, the first 2 tournaments, or the first 3 tournaments, and the next 2 tournaments or 3 tournaments, and the next 2 tournaments or 3 tournaments. And for each chunk of the season, try to get meaningfully better. It doesn't matter if, at the first tournament you go 2-4, and the next tournament you go 3-3, and then the next tournament you're back to 2-4, and the next one you're 1-5, and then the next one you're 3-3. I mean, that's what sophomore year is like. Maybe there's a 4-2 in there, maybe there's an elimination round appearance, but there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. Understand sample size. One tournament where you have a worse record than the previous tournament doesn't mean that you suck. It doesn't mean that you have messed everything up and that you have regressed. Check in with yourself and be realistic. Are you actually getting better? Do you actually know more stuff? Are you getting better speaker points over a longer period of time? Are you winning more affirmative debates? Are you winning more negative debates? Do you feel more prepared? Do you know more arguments? As long as you're making that kind of progress, don't worry and don't decide that you're bad just because your competitive record says you're bad, or just because you've lost again to the critique, or you've lost again to conditionality, or you've once again gone 3-3 and lost a break round at a tournament. Don't sell yourself short. It's hard, and all of a sudden one day you're going to realize, wow, sophomore year I learned so much. I'm so much better than I was when Batterman talked to me at the end of the SDI. Number 19. Avoid useless comparisons. John Wooden says we are all equal and that we can all strive to become the best we are capable of becoming. We can always improve, but we shouldn't compare ourselves to others. We get in trouble when we start trying to measure up to someone else. Of all the things I know about sophomores, one thing that sophomores love more than anything is a pecking order, and they love rankings, and they love comparing themselves to each other, to previous sophomores and to current sophomores. You all care very much about who's in which lab at camp, and who's debating with who, and who's going to which tournament, and who's on the, who's the C team, who's the best sophomore team, who's going to the hoedown, who's going to Woodward, who's doing this, who's doing that. It's all totally useless, unimportant garbage, and it doesn't affect you. Very few people care at all who the best sophomores are. No one does, honestly, other than sophomores. It doesn't matter if you're the best sophomore at a tournament or the worst sophomore at a tournament. Just debate and get as much out of that tournament as possible. There are many, 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 many great debaters who were terrible as sophomores. And there are many, 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 many great sophomores who ended up terrible debaters. Where you are on the pecking order on August 1st, 2013 is not where you will be on the pecking order in May of 2015 or 2016 when you're a senior. Stop the temptation to compare. Stop the obsession with how good other people are. Fluctuations are gigantic in the sophomore year, and it doesn't much matter. The question is, how good are you compared to yourself? Are you getting better? Are you doing the most work you can do? Are you getting better as much as you can get better? Compare yourself to yourself, and if other people want to compare you to someone else, let them, but you shouldn't care. Number 20, don't settle for less than your best. John Wooden. You may be better than the rest, but you are not a success until you have made the effort to become the best you can be. On that first day of camp, we talked about the growth mindset and how you need to think about hard work and how hard work can improve your ability as a debater. It's really important as a sophomore that you keep that lesson in mind. I think, and I don't think that, I'm pretty sure this is true. This isn't really just a Batterman thinks. This is just true. You can make more improvements during your sophomore season than any other season in debate. Your novice year, you're just kind of getting introduced to debate. You're building some fundamentals. Your junior year, you're kind of solidifying your varsity skills. You're getting a lot of repetition against older competitors. Your senior year is mostly just tweaking, and honestly, it's mostly about just getting good arguments. But your sophomore year is about all of that. You solidify the fundamentals that you learned as a novice. You start to learn varsity level skills. You start to get a ton of repetitions against better competition. You set the foundation for the rest of your career. If you have a good sophomore season that builds fundamentals, that gets a lot of debates, that develops versatility, and gets good work habits developed, that gets good preparation habits developed, that gets you a basis of good research skills, you can make such an amazing progression over the course of the year, and you all have no idea. It's amazing to watch sophomores develop. It's in many ways even more staggering than novices. When you're a novice, you start nothing about debate, and at the end you're kind of good. But a sophomore can start just kind of okay or struggling, and they lack a lot of skills. And at the end of the year, it's like, wow, this is a real debater now. And the transition from struggling and still lacks fundamentals and not doing great to really strong junior prospect is something that everyone can do. And it doesn't matter where you are now. A good sophomore season that focuses on getting better and on improving and not just on winning can set you up for a much better rest of your debate career. You can, I don't want too much pressure on you. You can succeed if you have a bad sophomore year. If you don't get that much better this year, you still have a shot, but you're not going to be as good as you could have been if you make the most of this upcoming school year. Take it seriously, but keep it in context. You're a sophomore. Success as a sophomore is different than success as a senior. You don't have to compare yourself to others. You just need to compare yourself to yourself and do the best that you can every day that you spend on debate, getting better at debate. And at the end of the year, you will be better at debate, and you will be ready to have a really successful junior and senior season. And that should be your goal. Your goal should not be to win at debate as a sophomore. Your goal should be to get better at debate as a sophomore, and that's what I think winning is for a sophomore. So those are my 20 things. Questions, if any? Not a single one? All right, go home.